Hi there, my name is Andy Farquharson and I'm your host on Alternative Exit,
the podcast dedicated to educating small business owners about the possibilities, benefits and challenges of transitioning to an employee ownership model. Did you know that there are over 200 million SMEs around the globe with an owner that will be retiring within the next 10 years? Many of these owners will never actually find a buyer for their business, forcing them to close their doors, wreaking havoc on their employees and the communities. There is an alternative. This show will explore different forms of employee ownership and the best practices for a successful transition. Each episode is going to feature interviews with experts on employee ownership, business owners who've successfully made the transition, and consultants who've helped facilitate these changes.
Okay, now let's get on with the show.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Alternative Exit. Today's guest is Joseph Cureton. Now he's a builder operating at the intersection of technology, worker ownership and cooperative economics. So Joseph's journey runs through some of the most ambitious employee ownership experiments of the past decade. I mean, he previously was one of the founders and led Obran Cooperative, like the first worker-owned cooperative holding company in the US, where they acquired and converted companies into like a $40 million platform. And now he is the CEO and co-founder of Sarvis Health, where they're building something special, a focused ESOP-based rollout of home-based care agencies, paired with a proprietary operating platform called Sarvis OS. So needless to say, there's lots of exciting things for us to talk about on this call. So Joseph, welcome to the Alternative Exit.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So mate, I have been so excited about recording this, like since our first conversation a little while ago, further interaction with you and your ideas and thinking. There's so many exciting things for us to dig into. But like, firstly, I want to go back to your years spent at Obran. You guys were sort of the first worker cooperative holding company. You're spanning lots of different industries across staffing, construction, and healthcare. But now at Sarvis, you've narrowed to home healthcare specifically and shifted from co-op explicitly to ESOPs. I mean, so what did you learn at Obran that led to these two very sort of deliberate shifts?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, first of all, for allowing me this opportunity to be here. And yeah, I'm excited to share a little bit of, lessons learned and some, I think, maybe key insights as like an operator, right? When I first got started with Obran back in 2016, it was really a sort of labor of love. Like it was a social enterprise trying to figure out how to do staffing, which was our first industry, for people, specifically folks coming out of prison and jail. So very social enterprise, scrappy, if you will. Fast forward to when I exit in 2025, and we're growing. We have multiple different industries and multiple different segments. The business itself is evolved and is very different. And obviously there's been a lot of bumps along the way, a lot of like lessons and things to avoid. But also there's been a whole heck of a lot of like understanding of different models that could, I think, in our current reality, shift and change folks, outcomes. So the co-op specifically, like why we started there, it actually came the most organically to us. It wasn't a sort of academic choice. It was mainly a choice of necessity. We didn't have any money to start. And ultimately, the idea that we wanted to share the business was sort of the root of what we wanted to do. And building from just a very simple understanding of every person's sort of livelihood or hour is valued internally the same. We kind of arrived at the cooperative model, also with a lot of help from our community. So we actually encountered this group called BREAD, Baltimore Roundtable for Economic Democracy, and it is a loan fund in Baltimore City, part of a group called Seed Commons now.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the idea of the co-op formed because it was the most sort of fit for purpose thing that we had at the time. And it just made sense at the time. Now, I will say that the cooperative form also has a lot of drawbacks. Specifically in the United States, there's I would say a misconception of the sort of inmates running the asylum, if you will, right?
Well, I think that's a global misconception as well.
Oh, there we go. Unfortunately, right? And that's just simply not true. right? Well, actually, I will say that's true in some cases, and
Yeah.
there's absolutely the reality that sometimes that just is the case. And also, I will push back on it only because just like any business that struggles with early or mid or late stage issues, so do cooperatives. Like there's actually no real difference in it. I will say the other side of it, in the sort of good part of the inmates running the asylum, is that they all actually care about the asylum, and like not in a hokey way, in a way that's actually material and that really sort of actually changes things,
Yeah.
dynamics and decision making specifically. And so I come to this sort of like next chapter with more of maybe of a sober view of what the benefits or drawbacks of shared ownership or employee ownership or however you want to call it, having been in the thick of running something that's super hard, that spans multiple industries, trying to figure out how to both share the wealth and share the upside, as well as understanding how to like protect against the downside and risks and all the rest of it. And so, yeah, I think I'm like a little bit less rose colored glasses this time around. So anyway, that was a long-winded way of saying like, yes, I've been there and done that in some ways.
Yeah.
And I think some of the core lessons are that it is just business as usual, that you actually really do need to understand that this isn't a magic bullet. There is no quick solve. You do have to kind of grind it out. You do have to increase revenue, understand costs. You do have to think about innovation and think about sort of understanding where your product or service fits in the market. There's no silver bullet for that. Management still is management. You still have to actually treat people well with respect and dignity, and you have to hire great people for the folks that don't fit the culture. There's no magic bullet. And there is some magic. There is some magic under it. And I think it is really important not to lose sight of that too. I can talk about the sort of like dynamics between the cooperative and the ESOP and like how there's like a little bit of nuance and difference, but ultimately the sort of, the core takeaway here is just, you still have to be a great operator at the end of the day to affect change in the world, period. And then on top of that, we can talk about the magic of the employee ownership side.
Yeah, look, I think I love how you describe that, like the fact that there's no magic bullet, but then you sort of just highlighted these are all the things that just make a great business. Doesn't matter what structure it is. These are just all the things that just need to happen on a regular daily basis. One thing you did talk about there was the little bit of magic where everyone is an owner and they feel that. I mean, how are you going to be bringing that from that cooperative model where it's probably a little bit more explicit, where in the ESOP model where it's a little bit more, it's a layer away from people.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think so. I just recently was at the National Center for Employee Ownership in the United States conference, and there was this, the keynote speaker, Adam Grant, was talking about sort of your challenger network, basically folks in your corner that are kind of disagreeable with you, but they're givers, right? Like they really want to see you win and they really want to see you sort of thrive, but they're kind of just sometimes you're like, yeah, but you're telling me the hard stuff, I think that the actual magic that I have seen, the best magic that I have seen in employee ownership, is that when you figure out how to get those disagreeable givers all around you and aligned incentive to basically have everybody be disagreeable givers for everybody else. Right. The one thing that you really don't want to do, that I have made the mistake of in the past, is think that you have disagreeable givers, and really what you have around you are folks that are like, yeah, this is great, and like, I don't know, you're doing great. It's like, no, more, right? And so I think the ESOP model kind of, yes, it definitely changes the dynamic because it moves it from purely cash flow and distribution of profit to thinking about something, I would say, more ephemeral or less concrete than that, which is valuation, which is subject to market forces and subject to, other things. And at the end of the day, it also is the thing that or a part of that is there are things in that you can control as a frontline employee or as a manager or as a, participant in that ESOP. And our job as operators are to break it down and demystify. The same thing in the co-op, right? Like there's no difference. Our job is to create the culture around it. It's the same thing in the co-op, right? There's no real difference there. And our job is also, I think, to keep it in view, like literally in front of every person, that like, this is why we're here. And it's both the immediate purpose of serving whatever customer that you're serving or creating whatever product you're creating, but it's also the higher order purpose. It's about the community that we're a part of, or it's about the mission that we're doing together. And I think a kind of last thing is we get to share the benefit, which is, again, last thing here. But it also is an aligning thing, like everybody's directionally moving in the same way. So the magic, I think, comes in process. Is not just in the like, we're all sort of going to be millionaires at the end of the day. It's like, we might not all be millionaires. One thing I'm very clear about for everybody who ever has worked with me is like sober about the sort of financial sort of side of things. We practice open book management. We are very clear about what actually is and is not possible. And, in home healthcare, it's a very specific industry. It's growing incredibly fast. And there is great opportunity for us to acquire companies and to grow into a large entity. And at the end of the day, the reality is you have to take care of the person in front of you.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to do that well.
Love that. Well, while we sort of transition to that sort of home healthcare conversation, I mean, look, the industry is right at the heart of the Silver Tsunami. Right? Not only is there sort of aging owners of these businesses, the clinics that they've got are going to be booming. You've got this caregiver workforce that deserves a better type of job, and they need to be engaged. Why is this an industry where you think employee ownership matters the most right now?
Yeah. So in Obran, I would say, largest experiment, the thing that we tried the most at was home healthcare. And I think it actually was one of the places where I can say that we did a fairly decent job of understanding that industry and moving forward in it. I also see, when it comes to technology, the ability for us as a individual company to affect change, not only in just our business, but across the industry. I think employee ownership is, when it comes to mission, like I said, aligning force. First, you got to just take care of the customer, or take care of, in our case, the patient that's right in front of you. But ultimately, you are working as a home health care aide or clinician, RN, PT, OT, whatever it might be, in a reimbursement rate environment, in a, most of the time government payer rate environment. Yeah. You're not setting the terms, period. Right. And there's less control, actually, at the end of the day. And all in my experience, anyway, of these, the people, the actual employees that are there, are not in it to make millions of dollars. They're in it because they actually care about human beings. And just as a starting point, I want to be in business with those types of people. Right. I could do anything with my life. And I could,
Yeah, but isn't that tough to differentiate yourself in this world? Not so much to differentiate yourself, but in a world where there's a large amount of PE capital flowing into this space, I'm sure who are probably going to be potentially pay a lot higher because it's very part of a very different strategy for them. I mean, what is the key sort of points of differentiation that you talk about for the workers and the potential sort of people sellers of these businesses?
Yeah, I'll differentiate those two things, right? So for the seller of the business, ultimately, they are driven by their own internal motivations. And unlike I am not a monolith, or we are not monoliths as human beings, right? And sometimes those motivations can even be contradictory. They want to do the absolute best by their people, and they want to make a killing doing it, right? And I'm not going to fault anybody for wanting to be remunerated for their hard work, ever. Right. That said, I want to be clear, right? I think clarity is kindness. Ultimately, I want to say, here is a fair price. And this is what it looks like from day one for us to come in and acquire. And what are your goals, right? Are your goals to walk off into the sunset in 6 months and transition this business to somebody who just will go and run it? Or are your goals to stick around for 3 or 4 years and make this your legacy and put your name on the door and keep it there, right? So I won't say that there's actually a one-size-fits-all answer to sellers, because not one human is the same.
Yeah.
So that's an unfortunate reality, but that is part of what I think our differentiator is we meet people where they're at and we give them what they actually are after, not what we, one get this and that's it, That said, tax incentives are real. So ESOPs have a fairly robust sort of tax regime in the United States. We can help defer capital gains, or if structured correctly, in perpetuity for sellers. Generally, when it comes to price, we are competitive in the market. We've gone head to head with private equity in the past and won. Ultimately, when it comes to the motivation for the seller that's beyond money, from a stable operator that wants to look at this as a long-term asset to hold and to do right by their community, we are here for the long run. I want this business to be here for hundreds, if not, more of years, because this, I think, is an asset that is not just specifically home healthcare, is an asset that is not like a thing to get sold. It's an asset to take care of and root inside of a community and help people in one of the most critical times in their life. That might be different for a toy manufacturer, but like for what we're up to, it is really important for us to root in a place and for us to be part of that fabric of that community. And they know that, right? Because they've been there and done it for years. And so I think beyond the sort of sale, it is also how do we operate? How do we manage? And the ESOP plus what we're building in Sarvis is that thing that helps both future-proof when it comes to understanding our current technology landscape and building against the future of that, as well as doing the just good old practice management of keeping folks healthy and happy.
Yeah. When you were sort of talking about, I guess, those fundamentals of the business that just need to be running well, regardless, just the operating, which needs to happen. There's obviously that magic that you talked about in the cooperative is something similar. Like there's still that ability to bring that magic to life in the ESOP as well, where there is that shared alignment. But what do you see are the key elements that people need to get right to really realize the impact of employee ownership on the business and for the customers or the patients?
I love this because I think it is a model question, and it's actually, I think it has nothing to do with them, right? I could create some random thing that allows for like a club, right? An association, a fraternal, right? And get at the same thing here. Frederick Laloux calls it like evolutionary purpose. Like, what is the reason, the raison d'etre for being here? Like, why do this with your whole life, with your whole day and your whole self instead of doing something else? I think the ESOP versus co-op versus EOT, it's a false dichotomy. It's just a means to an end. There are structural differences. I'm not saying I'm not washing away the structural differences, but the practice of engaging people, the practice of having somebody come into work and care. It should be. I believe that it could and should be the same across models. Now, when it comes to how, as an ESOP participant versus myself as a member of a worker co-op versus a beneficiary of an employee-owned trust, do I actually tangibly get cash? Okay, maybe those are different. Yes, maybe there are some differences there. And in which case, maybe I'm thinking a little bit differently about the business. But the underlying engagement, the underlying sort of mechanics of when I wake up and I come into work and there's a ritual every quarter around reviewing our financials, and we break it down and we look at every line that you have a question about or your fellow aide has a question about. And when you say, well, why are we spending so much on supplies and can't we buy that in bulk? That should be the same. Or when it's like, hey, we have this recruitment process, but I know that there's this technical school down the street and I'd love to go and talk to them. Can I go and do that? Can I have a business card for that? Right. That to me is where the rubber meets the road, is do you have people piping up and saying, hey, I really want blank, fill in the blank, right? That to me is really what the difference between an employee-owned company, EOT, ESOP, co-op, what have you, and a non. And to me, there is a reality of tying the incentive to the outcome and giving people a real clear path or line of sight onto that action that makes something different. And lastly, I do think from I would say moral place for myself, I want to put my money where my mouth is at all times. I think Obran was a massive experiment in me trying to for myself, right? Me trying to stay aligned with what I believe in and stay true to what I believe in. And don't get me wrong, it was hard, throughout the process. We in Obran practiced I would say a fairly radical form of democratic control.
Okay.
where when you're talking about inmates running the asylum, where it's like if another person outside of our organization came in and looked at the organization, they'd be like, whoa, like, whoa, that's incredible, right? And depending on their orientation, they may
Yeah,
be turned
yeah.
off or maybe turned on, you know? But ultimately, I think like it was a part of the experiment to stay true to that idea that both in terms of financial outcome, whether win or lose, and in terms of control, we tightly aligned those two things with being part of the organization. If you're a member, it's supposed to be that you have lots of superpowers, right? In an ESOP, it may be a little different because of the trustee relationship with the trust, or because of the management and board relationship to the organization. It's maybe a little less direct in that sort of democratic control. However, I don't think that it has to necessarily be the most rate limiting thing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I loved your sort of observation that this is it's not dependent of the model, because even in a lot of those examples that Lulu talked about in the evolutionary teal, a lot of them have a very traditional ownership structure,
Totally.
which is sort of so you're able to create that sense of evolutionary purpose within sort of whatever form that you've got, but it does just take those great elements. And so, I mean, you talked about two of those great elements around sort of that having some great rituals around open book management and giving people the opportunity to be able to participate. What are some of the ways, like, I mean, is there anything else that you'd add to that list? And then what are some of the ways in which you bring those to life?
Yeah. So things that I would add to that list, being like psychological safety, being able to say no and being able to have that no listened to is super hard. I don't care what organization type you have. I don't care what, we're living in a world where you have to do things that are hard and that are ultimately sometimes really difficult to navigate, right? Decisions that have massive trade-offs on either end. But allowing people to say no and really understanding and taking the time to listen to people, prerequisite for any great organization. And I would say prerequisite for employee ownership, full stop, right? There's nothing worse than saying, you're an owner of this organization, but I'm not going to listen to you.
Well, I feel that, I feel that happens in a lot of employee owned roles. It happens in a lot of companies.
Yeah.
Regardless. Sorry, I just get the focus back there. But it's a great point to highlight.
And then I would say, so some fundamental sort of process or sort of nuts and bolts things, right? In our current experiment, in Sarvis, what we do is we think about our current economy, our current sort of world, as both the employee ownership, sort of just brass tacks, getting sort of shared and that kind of thing, as well as that control part. And we actually want to roll that out into home healthcare organizations in sort of three ways. One is culture and people. So thinking about who we hire, how we hire, like, just some of the general, just good business practices on that side. Then a novel thing, then something a little different. We use a piece of technology that we've built that actually we started in Obran and then moved into Sarvis. And that is both a execution or operating layer of what we're doing. So think everything from intake, eligibility, authorization, the scheduling of people, billing, revenue cycle management, and it's all under a single sort of EMR-like thing that we built that comes around an agency, wraps around their current organizational sort of practices, and standardizes, streamlines, adapts to, builds with those current processes, and encodes it in literally a platform. So one of the key learnings I had in Obran was like how you do something changes the outcomes, right? So if it's done over Slack versus text message, if it's done over email versus text, like the actual tools that you use in your daily life really have a very like direct one-to-one relationship with how good or what the quality or efficacy of whatever the intervention or thing that you're trying to do is. So our experiment here is building with that organization and coming around them with novel technology. Think AI-enabled workflows for every piece of that entity, helping them do more with less, better, faster, stronger. And evolving with them over time. So we come with a solution, but it's not the solution. It is the starting point for them to shape. So that's part one. But then part two of that is then they get to shape it. right? So there's nothing worse than telling an owner that I'm not going to listen to you, right? There's nothing better than having a direct way, me as an individual aide, to make a like bug report or make like a suggestion about where this product, right, this piece of technology might get better, and then seeing it happen the next day. It is.
But isn't that, I don't know, Joseph, I love the idea. It's inspiring. And obviously the evolution that we've had over the last sort of 6 months in terms of that technology shift with AI is making it so much more possible. But you're speaking to these nurses on the front line. These aren't people who are typically going and building pieces of software, or even sometimes they may not even have the right kinds of context to be able to do that. How do you facilitate that part one and part two of that technological shift?
Part one is, I would say, the baseline open book management, great sort of the rituals, right? So like, what does your team huddle look like? What does every day, stand up look like? That sort of thing that just engages people in understanding the business of what the thing that they're doing is. I'm in home healthcare. It's a lot about our census and our reimbursement rate and our payer mix, and how do we get referrals in, and like the things that drive a home healthcare business. Then on this, and recruiting, lots of recruiting, right? Then
in terms of finding new nurses and carers.
Exactly. Huge sort of part of our business. The second part is understanding process. Generally, in almost every business, there's SOPs, right? There's generally written, things as, I say that, and then I've done so much diligence on so many businesses, and I'm like, wow, okay. Yeah. So like ultimately they
may be written, they may not be read.
Exactly. So ultimately what we're basically saying is that SOP that was written and never read, right, is a living human process that can be encoded in software.
Yeah.
It has the opportunity to be. Now, is it always? No, sometimes it's like technically not feasible at the time. So, i.e. like billing in some cases. Some folks just like, it's not possible in some people's situation to do that. Reimbursement is it's a whole industry, right? Like revenue cycle management is literally a whole industry. That said, we want to, as best we can, come around those processes, and where possible, instead of giving people an SOP to say like, hey, how does this work? How does this look? It's like, okay, you want to talk about how to schedule a patient. Cool. Let me literally do a ride along with you. We have a solution, right? Like we have a way of doing it. Right. But like first, let me just sit with you for a week. Let me just observe you for a week, right? This is what you take a piece of paper, you put your route down on a piece of, like I literally am watching, right? You put your route down on a piece of paper. In that piece of paper, you're saying, I'm going to this place, this place, this place. Then you put it into Google Maps. Okay, cool. From Google Maps, you're now creating your day. Okay, right? Like, what would that look like if instead of doing that whole handwritten manual process, right, we just gave you that solution, right? Where pre-filled, your routes are already there and you can just execute on your day. Okay, right?
Yeah.
It's like that level of just very specific for a single workflow, and then do it again and again and again and again, and just like delight people with the ability, with the speed that you can actually deliver on things. And it's an accumulated win, right? So it's not just one win. You have to win over time and prove over time that this thing works in order to get engagement. So we believe that AI, artificial intelligence, large language models, whatever, right? We are, like, I would say not even like a 10th of the way of usefulness, meaning there's utility stored in these models. The capabilities are way outstripping our use of it. And so our job is to diffuse that into the business, or to allow for adoption of that capability. And right now we're like just scratching the surface in most of the sort of business use cases that we have for this. But deploying it through a specific substrate, like deploying it through a piece of technology that we as an individual worker-owned thing own, I think that's the magic.
Yeah, I think that sounds huge, especially like you think about, home care, it's not the most technologically advanced industry.
No.
You'd think that this is one that it's not the one that where people are saying AI is coming for your jobs, right? No, these are the safe jobs, but these are the ones that there's obviously a lot of opportunity to make these easier with AI. But so this is the question I've got for you, this type of investment from you guys, in terms of this rollout platform, this is a big investment in technology. And also people, because I'm sure that this means you've got to put the technologist in with these nurses who are the experts in their job. I mean, what does that look like in terms of sort of how you invest, how you drive that collaboration between those two people?
Yeah, so our team is currently small but mighty. So we have a lead engineer who's actually joined us from Tesla, myself. I have a software engineering background, and basically a people or process person that kind of is the glue between the two of them.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at is when we come into an agency, that agency, generally our target is $10 to $15 million in size, right? So from an enterprise value perspective. And we're, maybe 100, 150 people, right? So, I can still be friends with all of them, at the end of the day. And really the job, our initial starting point job, the investment to make is how fast can we start in the back office before we move into the front office. So when I say back office, it's all of the people who would be sitting in the agency's literal office, not seeing patients, not seeing folks in the field, and win trust and win points there first. Right?
Okay. So are we starting there just because it's more contained environment where?
Yes, it is. It is a more contained environment, and also it is generally the most. Like we use a lot of robotic process automation meets large language model meets, a UI, right? And so it's a lot of the easier early wins from a margin lifting workflow perspective, where we know that we can affect change really quickly. So billing is generally the first place that we look, because in this industry, like 16% of claims are, denied because of human error. And like, there's generally 20 or 30% of just every dollar that comes in is subject to some clawback or denial or something because of a human, in the loop. Not saying, these are heroic, sort of like feats. Our payer and our healthcare system bureaucracy is insane. So just start there. And it is definitely strangling the ability for care to actually happen. But so that's where we win, right? First, once we kind of start there, let's a month. Right. So once we sort of start and win there, and we do this, we're currently doing this with 2 design partners. So design partners for us is a way of basically trialing and testing the software in a kind of safe to fail environment and taking some gain share with them. So we don't own the agency. We want to make sure that we're sort of proving the technology out first, but we're really seeing lots of benefit in those test cases.
Okay, so this is like a pre-acquisition. You're just working with them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we believe that so we're thinking about like a spectrum, right? We don't own the company until we own the company fully. And in the case where we don't own the company, we still believe that this industry needs to evolve. And I think part of that is evolving towards employee ownership. I believe that for myself, but it might not be right for everybody at every time. So we started with design partners thinking about software and then software plus operations, then moving to the employee ownership side. And once employee ownership, we're building a network of these employee owned or non-employee owned companies in the United States, right? So we're currently working with design partners that are interested in taking basically what they have as a very low tech, EMR plus maybe some spreadsheets, maybe some tools, and building it into a single platform that they're running their entire agency on, that is all AI automated workflows that we can roll out with that operate sort of side and build best practices around. So and then as a next step, we start with like a group of clinicians. So when in the back office, start with a small test case. And generally these are the detractors. So in every agency, you have folks that if any sort of home healthcare agency operator is listening, they're going to be like, Yep,
I know.
You have folks that are just the noisiest, that are like the most opinionated, that just like every time that there's a group call, just like the most annoyed at the agency. Generally, those are the folks that care the most. Generally, those are the folks that really want to do the best job they possibly can. And they just want to be heard. Right. So our first thing is we generally look for those, and those are our first 5 to 10 design partner in the design partner, right? So we generally call them like a innovation team or something, give them a good title, right?
Yeah.
And those are the folks that we build with, because they're the ones that are going to tell us all the things that are wrong with every process and everybody, and why they don't like blank, because blank happens. And that's great, right? It makes the product stronger. It makes the process better. And ultimately, once we win with them, they then shout from the rooftops that like,
Yeah.
these guys are real, right? Like they actually listen to you, and then they do stuff. When you say that it needs to be blank, then they just show up the next day with the model that it just does it, right? So that's sort of like, it's not very secret. It's just like, practical rollout strategy for any change in any business, right? Go with the willing, but, listen to the detractors, listen to the people that are trying to like kibosh it, and involve them in the solution, right? And we pay them for that, right? Like even the design partner side of things, like we'll bring that group together and we'll pay them for that time, because that's expertise that they're baking into the product. And then from there, it's about sort of over a key integration metric for us is how fast or how slow we're able to actually acquire, i.e. LOI to close. But then how fast are we able to get every human, every person in that organization just fully using and running on the operating system on Sarvis that we're building? And, what key AI workflows are they using? Are they doing routing with us, or are they still doing something by themselves? Are they doing scheduling with us, or are they doing something by themselves? So that's sort of the other side.
Okay. How much of the rituals, the huddles, the stand-ups, the communication is going to be running through this OS as well? Is that
everything? Yeah.
everything?
So
Okay.
yeah. So the beauty. So we built, one of the first things that we built was communication, because right. In Obran, we were spending something crazy, like $500,000 or something on Slack. Like it was just, it's insane. And so we were like, okay, how do we do this? HIPAA compliant communication platform, both real time and sort of async, in a way that makes sense for home healthcare. And also, how do we bake in what we're doing from the Great Game of Business side into it? So what does it look like to have just a dashboard of, our current key metrics that we're running? And how does it look to have like, obviously sanitized P&L just in front of everybody, right? At all times, and how do you check in on your share price? And how do you then play with the model underneath it to say, like, what if we do a census of 1,000 to 2,000? What if we do a census of blank to blank? And like, what happens in that scenario?
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, happy to like maybe follow up with a little demo video for the link or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that's the whole point here, is like, it's not just about the operations of the home healthcare business. It's about the operations of your employee owned business. Inside.
Look, I'm sure a lot of people will be reaching out to you for that demo. I know that I definitely am one of those. So like, if we look ahead 5 years, I mean, what does a thriving Sarvis look like? And what do you think the broader landscape of sort of tech-enabled employee-owned companies looks like?
Yeah, I think that what we're doing should not be novel. So so this is a little paper that I worked up and shared with you. But I think that this pairing, the idea that AI-enabled human-centered workflows that are built into a single platform, a single plane, not 5 different apps all stitched together, one place that every person logs into. You can call it your intranet, you can call it whatever you want, but ultimately that enables all of the core business processes, to me, should be standard in employee ownership, because of the reinforcing loop that is ownership begets care or interest or participation, engagement. That engagement needs a place to go, right? If it just sits, it'll fester. And if at the worst case, if it festers, ultimately then people are like, but like I need to do blank. And it's like, well, here's a way, right? Like here's a way to affect change today, tomorrow, right? And that loop really helps drive engagement when it comes to understanding the business too. Because as soon as you're moving in one direction, you're going to be like, open up your eyes. So I think that should just be standard. Second thing, in 5 years, I think that I think the employee ownership landscape has adopted the idea of AI enabled sort of, single platform, and has like baked in all of the sweet, delicious benefits that are inside of employee ownership already into that, and are out competing because of that, right? But in home health specifically, the benefit of, or I would say the like unfortunate reality and the good news and sad news is like, we're all aimed at that end, right? So home healthcare is primarily helping folks in a time of their life and a season of their life where they need a little extra support, or where they need somebody to come in and help. And that's generally in the end of your life, right? 1 in 5 Americans are turning 65 every sort of day, like every 15 seconds or something, right? And ultimately, we think that we are going to, we're going to be on the helping end of that trend. And, we're really wanting from an execution standpoint to look at a couple of geographies. So we're in, the Great Lakes region primarily, and trying to figure out how to bring together, let's say, 4 or 5 different states in that time period and really build a community and a platform that can help those folks in Michigan and Illinois and, that are able to actually root in a community in a way that makes sense for the owned businesses that we're operating. Yeah. And then I really love the idea of both like spreading the word about employee ownership and building a platform that helps folks just imagine what it might be like for them. And so that's part of our sort of design partner or kind of like non-owned business strategy, or a network, if you will. We call it sort of our alliance. It's really like helping folks adopt software early, build in value, maybe prepare a seller for getting ready to exit, and then building and charting sort of like the path where employee ownership becomes the sort of option for you, but you're still reaping the benefits of the technology along the way.
I love the sound of that vision. It's super inspiring. Now we're coming to the end of the podcast, and before we go, I always ask people 3 fast round questions, and you just offer a quick response. Does that sound okay?
Let's do it.
Okay. So who is the leader that you most admire in employee ownership?
Leader I most admire, Jose Maria Arizmendi Arieta.
Okay.
So that's Arizmendi from, the Mondragon Cooperatives.
Yeah.
Priest in Spain, or in sort of like 1900s, and anyway, one of the founding sort of movers of the Arizmendi or the Mondragon group of cooperatives.
Very cool. You're the first person to mention Mondragon here in that question, which is great. And so, what is your favorite resource on employee ownership?
Favorite resource on employee ownership? Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll give you the nerdy answer, which is sort of, the IRS code. But my second would be, I like The Companies We Keep. I don't know if you know that book.
Love that book.
Yeah.
John Abrams had it in here.
It's not really a like resource in the same way as like a technical manual might be a resource, but it is something that I've definitely shared with a lot of different folks. And then maybe the first or second, we'll see which one, is Collective Courage by Jessica Gordon Nemhard. And it is a study of Black cooperative economics in the United States, sort of throughout the sort of formation of. Super inspiring, lots of different case studies in it. So yeah, between those 2.
Okay, I'll need to download Collective Courage. And then lastly, what would you say to a business owner who's sitting on the fence about a transition to an employee-owned model?
That is on the fence, so they're already aware of, but they're
tossing up whether to go with EO or the family succession or the trade sale or the P.
Sure. I would say, in a quiet moment when you have nothing but time, sit with a question of how would you like to be remembered, right? And if in 5 years or 10 years or whatever, you look back and there's a decision point, right, that you're making, what option would you regret not taking?
Absolutely love that one, Joseph. Thank you. I think it's a great thing to end the podcast on. Where, if people want to follow your journey, get that demo, where can people learn more and reach out?
Yeah, for sure. So always happy by email, Joseph, Joseph at sarvishealth.com, and also on LinkedIn. I think it's / Joseph Builds is, I think, my handle or whatever. So, yeah, those 2 places are fine.
Very cool. Joseph, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the leadership and shining a light on a new journey on how employee-owned companies can thrive and create better environments for everyone. So thank you very much for joining us in the Alternative Exit.
Cool. Thank you so much, Andy. All right.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to continue learning about employee ownership as an alternative exit, head across to abettermonday.me for additional links and resources. You can also make sure to subscribe or follow along in your favorite podcast app, and be sure to leave us a 5-star review.